You are watching an OraCloud Plus Training as a Service video snippet. Snippets are concise, targeted tutorials explaining how to use, configure, integrate, deploy, and support Oracle's Fusion Cloud applications. Snippets are delivered via FAST, the Fusion Application Support Tool. FAST is accessible via the web at www.oracloud.plus. No more watching hours of Learning Path style videos to get to the 5-minute snippet you need. Learn Oracle's Fusion Cloud applications in minutes, not hours. Hello and welcome to the Fusion versus PeopleSoft negotiations comparison video. This video is intended for existing PeopleSoft Strategic Sourcing licensees looking for a comparison versus Fusion's negotiations application, or what we call a functional work area. So quick note one is that negotiations in Fusion is really referring to largely sourcing, but also the integration of contracts because it's pretty central. And then the shared functionality called deliverables to manage compliance. Another note, when I say Fusion, it's often referred to as Fusion Cloud applications and or Oracle Cloud in the marketplace. Just note that they're all one and the same. Okay, so this video highlights the differences between Fusion's sourcing functionality and PeopleSoft's sourcing functionality. Key comparison areas are as follows, and we've got a few of them here. This is usually about 5, and this particular video is going to walk through 10 comparison areas. So first up, integration with requisitions. Then qualification or supplier profile integration, event creation, event monitoring and awarding, contracts integration, compliance functionality, supplier communication, so within the sourcing event, global transaction visibility, so that's the ability to see all the transactions and how they relate together and manage. What we'll call an abstract page, so a lot of times, particularly in government, there is a separate page that sits outside, it's publicly facing. And then lastly, what we'll call program management, right? So the driver of sourcing is often category-based sourcing, but we usually define pockets of spend with a savings rate, and we do some math to figure out which ones we want to go after or pursue, and we put together programs and we pool spend, and we often put particular category managers in charge of pools of spend. So programs are where we manage that spend, the facilities within the software to allow us to do that. So those are our comparison areas. Let's get started. First, requisition integration. So you'll see here a little bit different than PeopleSoft, where both in the life cycle as well as on the requisition, we didn't or couldn't see, or the requester couldn't see, that their requisition was currently being negotiated or sourced. So you can see that we've solved that here in Fusion. So that's a nice upgrade. Next up, qualification or supplier integration. So if you don't know what qualifications are, they're really some attributes that we set up in terms of areas, supplier diversity or insurance. There's all these qualifications that get stored against the supplier profile. So rather than having to collect those qualifications or requirements, or what PeopleSoft calls bid factors, at both the header and the line level, rather than having to collect them every single time we do a sourcing event, we no longer have to do that. There's two major advantages. One, we can use an initiative to go get them. The supplier can manage them in self-service, but those qualifications are stored on the profile. That's one. And then secondarily, what you see here is we can reference those same qualification areas as requirements in our sourcing event. So we can use templates and reuse the same calls, but you can do that with bid factors in PeopleSoft. Where it gets nice is the supplier can put their information against their profile once. We can assign a workflow to re-tickle them when it's become out of date. But as long as they manage their profile, because of the integration, sourcing will automatically pick up those requirements. So that's a nice upgrade. Next, event creation. You'll really find the event creation structure is largely the same in PeopleSoft as it is in Fusion. What's kind of nice is the UI has changed. As you can see along the top, we have these train stops. Certainly a big difference. The UI in PeopleSoft really was difficult for us to get in and change text, instruction text, train stop text. Once you're in Fusion, you just change it like you should inside the UI. You don't have to worry about, do I have to go into Word? Do I have to integrate with this version of Word in a server? All that complexity goes away. And so it really becomes easy. In fact, you can create styles for each of the different types of events that you do. So for example, selling goods or public works versus an auction, and the instructions are within the style. But if you want to change those instructions, it's simply the same as if you were in a web-based application or Word. Formatting is the same, text size, color, adding images, hyperlinks, all right there, all super easy. So that's a little bit about the difference in event creation. Next, event monitoring and awarding. There's only so many ways you can award, and monitor. But what you start to see that's much nicer is the visual appeal and the ability to see data visually, which helps drive decisions and make certain metrics more clear. And that's a little bit of what you see here. So when you look at the awarding and monitoring process, they're vastly improved. Just from a feel, ease of use standpoint, visuality within Fusion. Contract integration. So this, I think, is key. I always tell the story of, there was a big Department of Transportation job where IBM was facing Accenture and IBM won, but the particular state of this transportation job wanted IBM to accept unlimited liability. So after they awarded the sourcing in one application and moved to contracts in another, they they almost had to undo because of the problems of going to contract or getting a successful contract. Well, once you're in Fusion, and I apologize, I couldn't find the exact page with this button highlighted. You see a red button or a red square there in the image. You have all these suppliers. You know who you're going to award to. I can click my supplier, a button comes up called contract, and it initiates the contracting process all before I have to complete the sourcing event. So that, to most customers, is a huge advance. And so if I have a problem in contract with one, not a problem. I can undo that. So that's contracts integration. Next, what we'll broadly call compliance. So whether you're in sourcing or at a clause level in contracts, oftentimes we need to know that execution plus X number of days, we need certain tasks to be done. We might want workflow. Those tasks could be internal. Those tasks could be external, and that's compliance. So what you see here is something called a deliverable. And whether it's the deliverable on a template for a sourcing event, or whether it's the deliverable on a template for a contract, you can add them on the fly and you can set them up in advance. And so the ability to have those set up or set them up or add them on the fly, much easier, more intuitive inside of Fusion and Cloud. And then as you can see on the bottom, you could have a one-time deliverable, so 30 days plus execution, I want your certificate of insurance, or you could have a repeating deliverable. Supplier, we're going to give you a $200,000 bucket to perform drug rehab services. We want you to submit a monthly form attached here, and we want you to put this information in. We're going to attach workflow. So this is a big, big improvement in terms of managing compliance, and it only exists in Fusion. Next up, supplier communication. So really, when you talk about communication for sourcing, I see it as two worlds. Internal, meaning just within the Fusion licensee, procurement, and its, let's say, requesters or collaborators. And you have external communication via messaging. And truthfully, you've always had that even in PeopleSoft. The problem was, again, it was so difficult to set up. It rarely got set up, and the instant messaging required somebody to be online in the portal. It doesn't inside Fusion. It's more, let's say, ubiquitous. And if you don't answer your instant message, you'll get the same inside of a email. And as you would expect, it has reply, reply one, reply all, etc. All the standard messaging functionality. Now, internally, you have social. Social's really nice. You can set up groups tailored to this event or maybe approval, and you can start to use social, which is a real-time messaging tool, much like you would think Facebook, but all contained within the UI and the application of Fusion. So those are internal and external communication. I believe that the functionality in the external is similar, but the ease of setting it up really gets you a much higher rate of adoption because it's already there and on. And then of course, social doesn't even exist inside of PeopleSoft. Next, transaction visibility. So one of the things that we want to see is where all of our negotiations are, what state they're in. So this is kind of nice because it's where pagelets in PeopleSoft intended to go. And it's not that it won't, you can create pagelets. I don't know that you can get the visual appeal that you can get in Fusion, but it's much more important than that. These pagelets come straight out of the box. They're called infolets in Fusion, and they are not only visual, not only out of the box, but oftentimes if you look at messages or some of these right in front of you on the page, they have an arrow in the bottom right, and they can drill you straight into the detailed data of which you can click and start to troll through. So this idea of presenting your data, what you need to look at, what you need to pay attention to, what's happening that affects you in the next so many days, or what your progress is or performance. This is unique to Fusion, and it is out of the box. Number 9, so we've got 2 more to go. Abstract. So I talked a little bit about this, and what you see here, again, this is particularly helpful for government, but if you create your sourcing event with this abstract, you then get a page that allows different parties or anyone that knows where this page is to see which RFQs or events, sourcing events or negotiations are ongoing. Additionally, when you click on that, depending on how you're configured, the external party can download a PDF to get all these details in a document of what's happening in that negotiation. So again, more transparency is helpful here. All right, so lastly, program management. So this kind of looks like what you'd expect. When we source, we tend to source in pools. Those pools have an expected savings, hard and soft, so some metrics are not all about dollars, but the dollar metrics are planned and can be tracked against the plan. And so what you see here is an IT spend. So we may have somebody managing IT spend, and we set up different metrics for that person or people or team, and we track their different sourcing events against that metric, in this case per quarter. So this is a really nice tool that you can use. Again, out of the box, this is really minimal configuration. As you can see, you can just add and manage the negotiations that are in here. You have to set up your objectives and your timeframes, but you have a way to manage, a very visual way to manage the progress of your negotiations across your organization. Okay, so that was 10 comparison areas. That was quite a bit. Hopefully it wasn't too long and you learned something. As always, if you have questions, email us at feedback@oracloud.plus. Hopefully this was helpful and you enjoyed watching. Thank you.